I'm not proud of how I got here, and if I could undo it, I would, but I need to write this down somewhere before I lose my mind entirely. Maybe it'll help someone. Maybe it'll stop someone from making the same mistake I did. A little background. I've always been into weird shit. I guess you could call it a hobby, or maybe an addiction at this point. Conspiracy forums, deep dive YouTube videos, UFO documentaries, you name it, I've probably consumed it. But over the last few years, the usual rabbit holes weren't cutting it anymore. I wanted something real, something tangible, something that would prove all the insane things I've read about. That's how I ended up in a private dark web marketplace with a username and password given to me by a guy I met in a Discord group for extraterrestrial enthusiasts. He called himself Orbits, yeah, like the travel site, and he seemed to know his shit. He claimed he had seen things, real things. The kind of things that get you disappeared if you talk too much. One night, after a few too many drinks, I messaged him on Discord and asked, half joking, if I could buy alien DNA, something to study, test, or just keep as proof that the truth was out there. To my surprise, he didn't laugh. Instead, he sent me a link to a marketplace page with the caption, "Be careful what you wish for." The page was minimal, just a black background with a picture of a vial filled with a thick, greenish-black liquid. The description read, "Extraction, non-terrestrial, handle with caution, for research purposes only. Price, $2,000 in Bitcoin." I don't know what possessed me to go through with it. Maybe I was just drunk enough to think it was a good idea, or maybe I wanted to call their bluff and prove it was a scam. Either way, I transferred the Bitcoin, provided a burner address for delivery, and went to bed feeling equal parts excited and stupid. 3 days later, the package arrived. The box was plain and unmarked, about the size of a shoebox. It was lighter than I expected, but the tape sealing it was industrial strength. My first thought was that I had been ripped off, and inside was just some cheap prop or a syringe of dyed corn syrup. But as soon as I got the box open, I knew I was wrong. So wrong. Inside was a smaller case, like a mini cooler, and within it, the vial. The liquid looked almost alive. It shimmered in the light, shifting between dark green and black, with tiny flecks of something metallic swirling in it. The vial was cold to the touch, and when I held it up to the light, it seemed to glow faintly. The label on the vial was handwritten, X18B sample. Do not ingest. That's when I noticed the smell. It wasn't strong at first, just a faint metallic tang, like blood mixed with rust. But the longer I held the vial, the stronger it got. It was sickly sweet and acrid, like burnt sugar and rotting meat. I set the vial down and stumbled back, my head swimming. I thought I was imagining it, but the smell wasn't just in my nose, it was in my throat, my lungs, even my eyes. It burned, and I had to open a window just to breathe normally again. That should have been my first warning to destroy the damn thing, but I was too fascinated. I convinced myself it was just a chemical reaction or a preservative they used to keep the sample stable. Nothing alien about it, right? The first real problem started that night. I'd left the vial on my desk and went to bed early, figuring I'd decide what to do with it the next day, but I couldn't sleep. I kept waking up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding like I'd been running a marathon. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of things. Shadows moving in ways that didn't make sense, figures with too many limbs, too many joints, and always that same smell, stronger than before, filling my head until I thought I'd choke on it. When I finally gave up and got out of bed, I found my hands shaking. I figured it was just stress or dehydration, so I went to the kitchen for some water. That's when I noticed the trail. It was faint, but unmistakable. A thin, dark smear leading from my desk to the hallway. My first thought was that I'd knocked the vial over, but when I checked, it was still sealed, sitting upright exactly where I'd left it. The trail, though, it wasn't liquid. It was almost like a stain embedded in the floorboards, and it had that same sickly, sweet smell. I followed the trail, heart hammering in my chest, until it stopped abruptly in front of the bathroom door. The smell was overpowering now, so strong I had to cover my nose with my shirt. I pushed the door open, and for a moment I thought I was hallucinating. The mirror was cracked, spiderweb fractures radiating from the center like it had been punched, but the cracks didn't look random. They formed patterns, symbols, words maybe, though I couldn't read them. The sink was filled with something thick and black, swirling slowly as though it was alive. And the smell, it was unbearable, like burning hair and spoiled milk. My stomach turned, and I barely made it to the toilet before vomiting. I don't know how long I sat there, shaking and retching, before I finally worked up the courage to look back at the sink. The black liquid was gone. The mirror was still cracked, but the symbols had vanished. All that was left was the faint metallic tang in the air and a single drop of greenish-black fluid on the edge of the sink. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those patterns, those shadows. And worse, I felt like something was watching me. Not just in the room, but inside my head, crawling around behind my eyes. The next morning, I decided to get rid of the vial. I packed it back into the cooler, taped the box shut, and drove 2 towns over to toss it in a dumpster behind a gas station. I felt sick to my stomach the whole drive home, but I told myself it was over. I'd washed my hands of it. But when I got back to my apartment, the box was sitting on my desk, unopened. I swear to you, I didn't bring that box back. I couldn't have. There's no universe where I grabbed it from the dumpster, drove home, and set it on my desk without remembering. But there it was, sitting there like it had never left, the tape I'd used to seal it perfectly intact. For a while I just stood there, staring at it. The air in the room felt heavier, like the weight of the box was somehow pressing down on everything. My first instinct was to leave, to grab my keys and just drive until I couldn't see my apartment building in the rearview mirror anymore. But I didn't. I don't know if it was curiosity or something darker pulling me back, but I forced myself to walk over to the desk. The smell hit me first. That disgusting metallic sweetness was stronger than ever, seeping through the box like it was alive. I reached out to touch it, but stopped myself when I noticed something new. The tape sealing the box wasn't as clean as I thought. Someone, or something, had written on it in shaky, jagged letters. 3 words scratched into the adhesive like claw marks. "Let me out." My mouth went dry, and I stumbled back, nearly knocking over my chair. This wasn't a prank. It couldn't be. Nobody knew about the vial except me and Orbits, and there's no way that guy tracked me down. My brain scrambled for a logical explanation, but there wasn't one. The box couldn't have made its way back on its own. The writing wasn't there before. And that smell, God, that smell was worse than ever, thick and cloying, sticking to my skin like grease. I should have run. I know that now, but instead, I did something even dumber. I opened the box. The cooler inside looked the same as before. No scratches, no dents, nothing out of place. But when I opened it, the vial wasn't there. In its place was a folded piece of paper, stained with dark, oily smudges. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped it as I unfolded it. The writing inside wasn't like the scratches on the tape. It was precise, almost clinical, written in neat block letters. "It wants you." I don't know how long I stared at that note. My brain couldn't process it. It didn't make sense. None of this made sense. I grabbed the box, the cooler, the note, and everything else I could think of, and stuffed it into a trash bag. This time, I drove to a landfill on the edge of town, threw the whole thing into the deepest pit I could find, and watched a bulldozer cover it with mounds of dirt and garbage. But when I got home, The box was waiting for me again. This time it was open, the cooler was gone. So was the note. But the vial was there, standing upright in the middle of my desk, glowing faintly in the dim light. And now the liquid inside wasn't just swirling, it was moving, pulsing almost, like it had a heartbeat. I swear, for a split second, I thought I saw something small and dark press against the inside of the glass, like a tiny hand trying to claw its way out. Then I heard the voice. At first, I thought it was coming from my phone or my computer, some kind of interference. It was faint, almost a whisper, but I could feel it more than I could hear it. It wasn't speaking a language I knew, but the words, they were inside me, crawling around in my head, rearranging themselves into thoughts that weren't mine. Why do you run? Why do you fight? We are the same, you and I. I slapped my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The voice wasn't coming from outside. It was inside me, in my skull, in my blood, vibrating through my teeth and bones. I stumbled to the kitchen and grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a cast iron skillet, and swung it down onto the vial as hard as I could. The vial didn't break. Instead, the liquid inside reacted. It surged up, slamming against the glass like an animal trapped in a cage. The voice got louder, angrier. The words were still jumbled, still alien, but I could feel their meaning in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't asking for help anymore. It was demanding, commanding. "Open! Let me in!" I screamed. I don't remember doing it, but my throat was raw afterward, so I know I did. The skillet clattered to the floor, and I bolted from the apartment. I didn't grab my keys, my wallet, my phone, nothing. I just ran. My legs carried me down the stairs and into the street, and I kept running until I couldn't feel my lungs anymore. I ended up in a 24-hour diner miles from home, shaking so hard I could barely hold the coffee they gave me. I stayed there until sunrise. When I finally worked up the nerve to go back, the vial was gone. I should have been relieved, but I wasn't. The smell was still there, faint but unmistakable, lingering in the corners of every room. My head pounded like someone was driving nails into my skull, and I kept catching glimpses of things that weren't there. Shadows moving too fast, dark shapes in the corners of my vision. And the worst part? I could still hear the voice, faint and distant, whispering just below the edge of my thoughts. "You open the door, you cannot close it. I don't know how much longer I can take this. Whatever was in that vial, it's not gone. It's in me now, and it's getting louder. I don't know how long it's been since I slept. Days, maybe. Time doesn't feel real anymore. It's like everything is blending together. My head pounds constantly, and that goddamn voice, God, the voice won't stop. It's always there now, just beneath the surface. Sometimes it's loud and clear, demanding, but other times it's a low, sinister whisper, like it's trying to lull me into something. I don't know what it wants, but I can feel it burrowing deeper, eating away at me. I started noticing physical changes yesterday, or was it the day before? My skin itches constantly, and not in a normal way. It feels like something is crawling under it, slithering just beneath the surface. I've scratched myself raw in places, but there's nothing there. Nothing visible, at least. Except for the mark. The first time I saw it was in the bathroom mirror. It's on my chest, just below my collarbone. This faint, dark outline that looks almost like a bruise, except it's too precise to be accidental. It's not just a shape, it's a pattern, intricate and sharp, like those symbols I saw in the cracked mirror. At first I thought it was dirt or a stain, but no matter how hard I scrubbed, it wouldn't come off. In fact, the harder I scrubbed, the clearer it became, like I was revealing it instead of erasing it. Now it's spreading. Slowly, but it's definitely growing. The lines are branching out, snaking across my chest like veins. I can feel them throbbing sometimes, in rhythm with my heartbeat. And the voice? It's louder when I look at the mark, almost like it's reacting to it. This morning, I woke up to blood. It was everywhere, on my sheets, my hands, the floor. For a second, I thought it was mine, that maybe I'd finally scratched too hard and torn myself open in my sleep. But when I checked, I didn't have a single cut or wound. It wasn't my blood. I don't even know how it got there, but the smell was the same. That awful, metallic sweetness, so strong it made me gag. I tried to clean it up, but no matter how much I scrubbed, the stains wouldn't come out. And then I noticed the footprints. They were faint, but they were there. Bloody, inhuman footprints, trailing across my apartment floor. Each one was too long, too thin, with sharp, claw-like impressions where toes should have been. They started in the middle of my bedroom and led straight to the desk where the vial had been. Then they stopped. Just stopped, like whatever made them had vanished into thin air. That's when I noticed the writing. It was scrawled on the wall above my desk in the same jagged, scratchy letters I'd seen on the tape. Open the gate. The words were written in blood, fresh, glistening blood, and they were dripping. But when I touched the wall, it was dry, completely dry, like the blood wasn't there at all. I don't remember leaving the apartment after that, but I must have, because the next thing I knew, I was sitting in my car in the middle of an empty parking lot. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel, and my phone was buzzing non-stop. Missed calls, texts, emails, all from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Old friends, co-workers, family members, even my ex. The messages didn't make sense. Some of them were just strings of random letters like someone had mashed their keyboard. Others were chillingly coherent. "What have you done?" "You need to stop. It's watching you." One text from an unknown number hit me like a punch to the gut. It simply said, "Too late." I don't know how long I sat there before I finally drove home. When I got back, the smell hit me before I even opened the door. It was so strong now that it made my eyes water, thick and suffocating, like the air had been replaced with whatever was leaking out of that vial. My whole apartment felt wrong, like I'd stepped into a completely different place. The walls were too dark, the air too heavy, and every sound echoed like I was in a massive, empty cavern. The mark on my chest was burning, not itching, not throbbing, burning, like someone was holding a red-hot brand to my skin. I pulled my shirt off and ran to the bathroom, hoping to splash some water on it, but when I looked in the mirror, I froze. The mark had grown. It wasn't just on my chest anymore. It had spread up my neck and down my arms, jagged lines and sharp angles etched into my skin like a tattoo. But it wasn't just the shape that terrified me. It was moving. The lines were shifting, writhing, rearranging themselves into new patterns as I watched. And in the reflection, I saw something else, something behind me. It wasn't a shadow, it wasn't even a person. It was, I don't know what it was. It was tall, impossibly tall, with limbs that bent at angles that shouldn't have been possible. Its skin, or whatever covered it, was slick and black, like the liquid in the vial. And its eyes were wrong. They weren't eyes, they were empty, hollow pits, but I could feel them staring at me, digging into me, stripping me down to nothing. I spun around, but there was nothing there, just the empty bathroom and that goddamn smell. I was shaking so hard I could barely stand, but I forced myself to grab my phone and take a picture of the mark on my chest. If I was losing my mind, I needed proof, something to remind myself this was real. But when I looked at the photo, it wasn't just the mark. There was something else in the picture. A dark shape, standing behind me in the bathroom, just barely visible in the corner of the frame. It was closer this time. It's always closer. I don't think I'm alone in my apartment anymore. I can't explain it, but I know something is here with me. It doesn't make noise, doesn't move things around, doesn't knock on doors or walls. None of the obvious horror movie cliches, it's just present. I feel it when I breathe, like the air around me is heavier. I feel it in my chest, like a weight pressing down on my ribs. And I feel it in my head, like someone is constantly whispering in my ear, their breath hot and foul. The mark on my chest hasn't stopped growing. I've stopped looking at it in mirrors because every time I do, it's worse. It's not just a mark anymore. It's a roadmap, a blueprint for something I can't comprehend. The lines have spread over my entire torso now, down my legs, across my back. And when I touch them, they're raised, almost like scar tissue, but they pulse like veins. It's alive. The mark is alive and it's feeding on me. The hunger started yesterday. At first, I thought it was just normal hunger. I hadn't eaten much in days after all, but this is different. No matter how much I eat, I can't make it stop. I've torn through everything in my kitchen and nothing helps. Chips, bread, frozen meals. I've eaten it all, stuffing it down as fast as I can, but the hunger keeps growing, gnawing at my insides like a wild animal. I started getting desperate. I ate raw meat straight out of the fridge, and when that didn't work, I tried dog food I found in the pantry from the previous tenant. I gagged, almost threw up, but I still swallowed it because I thought maybe, just maybe, it would quiet the screaming void in my stomach. It didn't. The voice, its voice, is louder now. It speaks to me constantly in that same alien language I don't understand, but somehow feel in my bones. I've stopped trying to block it out because there's no point. It's not coming from outside, it's in me. It's part of me now. And it's hungry too. This morning, I woke up covered in blood again. Only this time, there was no question where it came from. My fingers were raw, the nails cracked and splintered, and when I looked at my arms, I saw rows of bite marks. My bite marks I'd been gnawing at myself in my sleep. The hunger had driven me to the edge and I couldn't stop it. I stared at the wounds, horrified, but there was no pain. Only the hunger and the voice whispering over and over, more, more, more. I tried to leave the apartment. I don't know why I waited so long. Maybe I thought I could ride this out, or maybe I was too scared to see if whatever's happening to me would follow me outside. But I couldn't stay here anymore. The walls feel too close, too dark, like they're closing in on me, and the air is thick with that horrible metallic smell that seeped into everything I own. When I opened the front door, I stopped dead in my tracks. The hallway outside my apartment wasn't right. It looked the same beige carpet, the same flickering overhead light, but it felt different, wrong. The air was colder and the shadows were longer, stretching across the walls in ways that didn't make sense. And then there was the sound. It wasn't loud, more like a low hum, almost below the range of hearing. But it wasn't coming from any particular direction. It was everywhere, vibrating through the floor, the walls, the air. It felt like it was coming from inside me, resonating in my bones. And beneath it, faint but unmistakable, was the voice. There is no escape. The door is open. You are the gate. I tried to ignore it and stepped into the hallway, but as soon as I did, I felt something brush past me. It was cold and slimy, like a wet hand sliding across my skin, but when I turned, there was nothing there. The hallway was empty, but the shadows were moving now, slithering across the walls like living things. I ran. I don't know how long I ran or how many stairs I stumbled down, but eventually I reached the lobby. Or at least, I think it was the lobby. It didn't look right. The walls were too dark, the floor too slick, and the air felt like it was vibrating. And in the middle of the room, where the front desk should have been, was the box. The same box I'd thrown away, the same box I'd buried in a landfill. It was open now, the cooler gone, the vial nowhere in sight. Inside was a single item, a large, jagged shard of glass, its edges coated in that black-green liquid. And beside it, a note. The same blocky, precise handwriting as before. Feed the gate. I don't know how long I stared at it, but eventually the hunger took over. I don't even remember picking up the shard, but I must have, because when I came to, I was sitting on the floor of my apartment, my arms covered in deep, jagged cuts. The blood didn't bother me. In fact, it smelled good. Better than good, it smelled right. The hunger was finally gone. But the voice? The voice was laughing. I think this is the last thing I'll ever write. I'm not saying that to be dramatic. I can feel it. Whatever this thing is, whatever it's been doing to me, it's almost done. And when it's done, I'm done. The hunger hasn't come back since that night with the shard of glass. I thought maybe that meant it was over, that I'd finally given it what it wanted. But now I know better. The hunger wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Last night I woke up to darkness. Not the kind you get when the power goes out. This was something else. It was complete, suffocating, like the light had been swallowed by something too big and too ancient to comprehend. The air was heavy, thicker than ever, and I could feel it pressing down on me, holding me in place. The mark on my body was glowing faintly now, pulsing like it had its own heartbeat. The lines had spread up my neck, across my face, and down to the soles of my feet. My entire body was covered in this thing, whatever it was, and I couldn't feel my skin anymore. I couldn't feel anything except the heat. It burned from the inside out, like my blood had turned to molten metal. And the voice, it wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a roar. The gate is open. The gate is ready. I tried to move, to get out of bed, but I couldn't. My body wasn't my own anymore. I could feel it moving, my limbs jerking and twisting like a puppet on strings. I was dragged upright, my legs carrying me across the room against my will. The shadows on the walls weren't shadows anymore. They were shapes. They writhed and undulated, growing bigger and darker until they spilled out onto the floor like living smoke. And then they started forming. I can't describe what I saw. I don't even think my brain understood it. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It wasn't anything from this world. They were tall, impossibly tall, with limbs that bent and stretched in ways that defied logic. Their bodies were slick and black, dripping with that same foul liquid from the vial, and their eyes, or the pits where their eyes should have been, were voids. Just empty, yawning voids. I don't know how many there were. 3? 10? 100? They kept shifting, folding into and out of each other like they were part of the same thing. And they were all looking at me. Number not at me. Through me. The tallest one stepped forward. Or maybe it didn't step. It just moved. It leaned down, its face inches from mine, and I felt its breath on my skin. It smelled like rot and fire, like the end of everything. And then it spoke. Not with words, not with a voice. It spoke in my head, in my blood, in the marrow of my bones. It spoke in feelings, in images, in pure, unfiltered terror. You are the gate. I woke up on the floor this morning. At least, I think it was this morning. The sun was shining, the air was clear, and my apartment looked normal. But nothing felt normal, not anymore. The mark on my body was still there, glowing faintly under my skin, and I could feel it moving, writhing, growing. I don't know what's happening to me. I don't even know if I'm still human. My reflection in the mirror isn't right anymore. My eyes are darker, the white's almost completely gone, and my skin has taken on a faint, greenish-black sheen. My teeth feel sharp. My fingers don't bend the way they used to. And when I breathe, I can hear something else breathing with me. The voice is still there, louder than ever now. It doesn't even bother speaking in that alien language anymore. It doesn't need to. I understand it perfectly. The gate is open. We are coming. I don't know who "we" is, but I can feel them. They're here, just beyond the edge of the world, waiting for the right moment to break through. And I'm the key, the door, the gate. I can feel my body changing. My skin isn't mine anymore. It's cracking, splitting, something darker and wetter oozing out from beneath. My bones ache, twisting and reshaping themselves into something else, something that shouldn't exist. And my thoughts, they're not mine anymore either. The voice is taking over, pushing me out, replacing me with something ancient and endless. If anyone finds this, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't mean for this to happen. I thought I was chasing the truth, but the truth chased me instead. And now it's here. I don't know how much longer I have. The mark is burning hotter now, the lines glowing brighter. The walls of my apartment are cracking, and the air is thick with shadows that are crawling toward me. The voice is screaming now, so loud I can barely think, and I can feel them coming through me, pouring into this world like smoke through a broken window. I'm not me anymore. I don't know what I am, but I know what I've done. I opened the gate, and now they're here. Run, before they find you too.